Hey, I'm excited for you to join me today because we're going to talk about how the speaker affects the mindset of the audience. I'm Jason Hewlett, Hall of Fame keynote speaker and Las Vegas award-winning entertainer. So you should watch this today because I'm going to share with you the 5 Bs. The Bs that are essential that you can choose to be in order to affect the mindset of your audience. So my question is, what do Ronald Reagan, Jordan Peterson, Chris Rock, Mr. Rogers all have in common? They all use one of the 5 Bs I'm about to share. They're all very powerful, interesting, compassionate. They all have authority, and at the same time, they all do some of these so well, it's astounding. I'm excited to share this with you. Let's go. So number 1 is kind of hard for me to share because be opinionated is a real important one. And I have even my own challenge with being opinionated. And so some of these will resonate with you, some will resonate more with me, but be opinionated is essential. That's number 1. So let's talk about Dr. Jordan Peterson. Now, this guy exploded onto the scene in recent years, and all he did was be opinionated. I mean, essentially, he's alienated half of an audience and the other half love him, right? And so when you think about altering the mindset of an audience, this is a guy who comes in saying, I'm just going to be opinionated to the point that I'm going to share that which I truly believe. And in today's world, I think it's wonderful that somebody, even with the chance of being canceled in a cancel culture situation like this, he's still moving forward. Being opinionated is powerful. And even on the other side of what Jordan Peterson might say, another speaker that is really interesting in that sense is a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. So Gary V, as he's known, he likes to really throw it in your face. If you follow him on social media, just like Jordan Peterson, I recommend both. Whether you like their opinions or not, it's important to watch how they affect the mindset of an audience. Like, they can convince you a lot of the times of what they're talking about just because they're so articulate and so powerful in what they're saying. Gary V uses a really interesting technique. Obviously, he likes to use strong language, and so just be aware. But at the same time, he likes to tell kids when they're asking him, I should make it by now, I'm 23 years old, and he says things like, you're 20 years old, go throw everything at the wall that you can, try everything, do everything. He's opinionated in that. Whereas Jordan Peterson, on the other hand, Jordan Peterson says things about men and women and the differences in gender and all of the things that is happening right now in the communications in the world. It's a very opinionated topic. And so the first essential is to be opinionated. That's how you help affect the mindset of an audience. The second B is be controversial. Yeah. That's even stronger than be opinionated in a lot of ways. You see, be controversial can actually help you win an election as the President of the United States. I'm talking about Donald Trump. Whether you like Donald or voted for him or not, the guy was so controversial, it was fascinating. He's calling people a loser from the stage. And then at the same time, he was selling people on the dream and the ideals of what he truly believed America could be. Then, of course, there was a Barack Obama. He was not so much controversial, but rather he was the complete polar opposite of Donald Trump. And so that's what's interesting about how somebody that's controversial can even win an election. I've even found it interesting for myself. As somebody who's prided myself on not being very controversial, I actually say controversial things in my speech in order to get the listener to listen to me. So somebody coming to a speech of Donald Trump is probably there picketing or ready to listen and do whatever he says, right? When I speak, I like to come in as somebody who's trying to collectively bring everyone together, but at the same time say something a little controversial. So for example, I'll talk about right after the CEO or founder has just mentioned, we have to hit our goals. We have goals as a company. If we don't hit our goals, we're losing. And I'll stand up right after him as the keynote speaker and I'll say, I appreciate what the founder and CEO said about goals, but I'd like to challenge that. And you can hear the audience like, you know, because they all follow the CEO. They do everything he says, or at least they try. And I say, why set a goal when you can make a promise? That's not to say that goals aren't important. Of course they are. But if you set a goal and you miss it, you just set another one. Whereas if you make a promise and break it, that's a one and done. And everyone goes, oh, They're excited about what I've just said. And then I say, look, goals are still important, but goals are particulars, promises are proclamations. And then we resolve. But I start with a little bit of controversy, even going against what the CEO has just said. So the second B is be controversial. The third B is to be conversational. Now, if you remember Mr. Rogers, he was the guy of my youth that I grew up watching on TV. He was so conversational, it felt like it was just me and Mr. Rogers hanging out. It's just such a unique thing to see somebody be so good on camera. I want to get there at that point as well. But to be conversational is a way to adjust and engage and shift the mindset of an audience. There have been people that were very particular or critical of Mr. Rogers early on in his career. In fact, people made fun of him his whole career because of his very conversational style. He was very slow in what he did, but he was talking to children, and so that was important for him. He went before the Senate early in his career, and he was trying to vouch for public television. In other words, they could have gotten a lot of money, and nobody could convince this hearing committee. And then Mr. Rogers walks in, and he starts telling a story and a poem to the senators up there listening who were hardened and didn't want to give public television any funding. And then Mr. Rogers read them a poem and spoke eloquently, was conversational, and they gave him the millions of dollars they needed for public television to be funded, and that launched his career. Number 4 is to be engaging. How can you be engaging? Some people like to get up on stage and do music and comedy and dance. I like to do some of those things, do some music in there. Then there was a guy named Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was the president when I was growing up of the United States. He was pretty old, let's be candid. He was one of the oldest presidents of all time. And people actually made fun of him for that. But he was still engaging. And there was something really interesting that happened after his first 4-year term. He runs again. And they really went to task on his age. And so, what did he do? He just kind of threw it in their face. He made it fun. He was engaging with the press. He was engaging with his opponents. He was engaging with everybody. This is what he said. But before I give you the quote that Ronald Reagan shared in his political campaign that you absolutely have to hear because it's amazing, I want you, if you will, to please comment below. Because as part of Be Engaging, I'd love for you to engage with this channel and with this video. That would be incredible. So put in the comments below some of the things that you're perhaps thinking about. Hey, this is one of my favorite things I've ever seen a speaker do to change my mindset. And so here's the quote. Ronald Reagan's opponent was essentially attacking his inabilities as an older person and the fact that this opponent was younger. Even the media was making fun of him. And Ronald Reagan says, "I will not make age an issue in this campaign. I will not exploit for political purposes the youth and inexperience of my opponent." Oh, yes. The crowd went bonkers. Even the opponent can be seen laughing if you Google him giving that quote. One of the great spins of all time by being engaging, even when somebody's opposing you. He shifted the mindset of a nation who thought he was too old, and literally they voted him back into office. And most people pinpoint it back to him being funny and engaging about his age versus what they were saying about him and how they didn't have the experience that he had in his older age. Brilliant. And the 5th B is to be persuasive. Now, if I were to ask you, do you think bullying in school is bad? You probably are like, well, heck yeah. Do you want your kid to go to a school where they could get bullied? No, most of us don't. But persuasiveness is the power of a great comedian named Chris Rock. Now, Chris Rock, I'm not going to do an impersonation of him, but I heard him do something that persuaded me to think differently as an audience, and I went, oh, that is so genius, because he talks about bullying. Now, you can Google this bit, and it's incredible. Language may be strong, but here's the summary of it. He said when he found out that his school told him, the school said, "We don't let anyone bully your children." Chris Rock went back and said, "I want my children to be bullied, and this is why. Because every single thing in life is dealing with a bully. Your manager, your boss, the people you live with, the people you work with. You're gonna have to deal with bullies your whole life. If you don't have to deal with bullies when you're in grade school, how are you going to be able to deal with bullies later in life?" He tells it so perfectly, so persuasively, that I had to add it to this video because be persuasive through the way Chris Rock sold the importance of bullying is so powerful. And so I hope that these points have helped you today. If you want to engage in the comments, please do, and put in some of the most powerful things some speakers have ever said that has changed your mindset. I hope these examples have helped you, and I'm excited for you to implement at least one, if not as many of the 5 Bs as you possibly can in all of your speaking. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll enjoy some of the others that we've made. I've made plenty of videos about public speaking. Maybe you could watch one called, "What is the best way to practice a speech?" Go check it out. It's on this channel.